Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Psychology of Landing Pages. We're Trada Paid Search, which is a crowdsourced paid search marketplace. We will be recording today's webinar, sending everybody a copy of the recording, a best practice brief, and a copy of the slides. I know people always ask those questions, so wanted to let you know. We'll be happy to send you guys background materials. The next slide we wanted to talk about, for those avid Twitter users out there, we have a hashtag called Landing Page Psych if you want to use it. We will be picking one person who uses the hashtag at random to receive an Amazon gift card. So again, the hashtag we'll be using is Landing Page Psych. Today, your landing page psychologists are Brandon Hess and myself, Elaine Ellis. Brandon, in addition to being my favorite person at Trada, has been around the scene online for quite some time. Since 2001, he first got a start in the newspaper as a designer. He's worked as a content manager, and then he started evolving into doing SEO and SEM in the last couple of years. He's worked for really big accounts, including, what were some of the accounts?
Pods, GE, Honeywell, Chemical.
So he's worked with some really big names, and I refer to him as our core Q&A guy because whenever I have a question, I go and ask Brandon. So if you have any questions as we go along, just chat them, and we'll answer them at the end. And then I'm Elaine Ellis. I'm a marketing manager here at Trada doing a little bit of everything. I'm more on the beginner level of PPC, so I understand and recognize no question is, too ridiculous to ask. So go ahead, let us know what you have. We're going to start with a little bit of what I'm going to call Landing Page 101. It's the blueprint of a landing page. If you're old hat, stick with us for a second, but you have different elements of a landing page. One, the most important is the call to action. Ollie Gardner of Unbounce has what he calls the 6-foot rule. You should be able to see a call to action from 6 feet away on a website. So they have a great call to action. It's clear. They have the headline, kind of tells you what the benefit is. They have client logos, which we'll kind of talk about what the benefit of client logos are in the future. They talk about their value propositions. They have a second call to action button below the fold. And what the fold is, it's what you're looking at right now. It's the screen that you can see without scrolling down. One thing that's really important is to have a call to action button above the fold. Don't make anyone work for it. You want to remove the friction from the buying process, and that's part of an important part of the psychology, making it very easy. And then we have a testimonial about someone who's used it, and we'll talk about why that's important in just a little bit. So what we want to do with landing pages are how we talk about triggering emotions in your visitors. So we want them to maybe feel urgency, see the value in your website, feel credibility, and feel that they can trust you. So there's different ways that we can do that, and we'll talk about each of these under those different emotions, but there's different triggers that people see where they feel more comfortable with you. People who've been around 10 years, people who are verified, members of organizations we trust, someone who offers you value. So we're going to talk about the different emotions and what you can do to kind of evoke them. The one that usually matters the most to me as someone who's a bit of a shopaholic is urgency. And that's the one I'm most respondent to. And so I'm going to let Brandon talk about some of those.
Yeah, so when we look at landing pages, it's often one of the more forgotten parts of an online marketing campaign. The reason being is there's so much focus on getting the right keywords, getting the right ads, making sure that the banner ad or the text ad that you're sending is performing up to par. So what often gets left behind is making sure that the landing page they get delivered to has all of those things combined to make sure that you're going to get the conversion you want. So one of these big things is urgency, right? And what urgency is to make sure that once someone clicks on your ad or gets delivered through an email marketing message, they have a reason to do your action now as opposed to coming back in a month, right? Because if you look at it that way, just because someone clicked on an ad, just because someone clicked through on an email, doesn't mean that they're any more push to go through that conversion method that you want them to go through if there's not something really pushing them towards that. So some urgent items you can use on your landing pages, there's that law of scarcity, right? So it's a limited time offer, act now, for free shipping, a countdown saying, hey, this holiday is coming up, if you're looking at Christmas or if you're looking at a certain event that your product or your service is around. Limited quantities is another big thing, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but really focusing in on that if they don't act now, they might not have a chance later. And that kind of helps spur that idea around, going back and researching a competitor, because that seems to drive a little bit of a higher urge to convert at the time.
I'm really countdowns because I'm a bit of a procrastinator when I shop. So the feeling that urgency, or you can ship until this day, that always kind of creates me to act, or makes me act.
Right, and it sounds like a simple concept at first, but you see this on a lot of the really well-designed landing pages, everything from, this example here as a retail store. There's a reason why they promote their big discount items, because what they're trying to do is drive that, this price is sort of amorphous, where you don't know if this price is good or bad, but if you see that there's a discount, there's more of a drive to act on that discount, right? Because now you feel like you're getting a deal. Now, whether or not that's true, that's hard to tell, right? Unless they do some research. But if they feel like, hey, I got here, if I act on this now, I'm going to get something, you want to make that prominent, because if it's hard to tell what the urgency is, then it's hard to tell what the urgency is, right? It's pretty much that simple. And it goes back to what Elaine talked about too, is that call to action has to also be obvious in this part. So, the urgency here is the 15% off sale on this apparel here. So,
with a limited time offer, yeah. When I was looking for examples of great landing pages, one of the ones I came across was Banana Republic, and their sale ended yesterday, and I actually purchased something. So it definitely moved me to act because limited time offer.
Right, and you'll see on there too, free shipping. Now that, whether or not that's limited, it's an incentive. It's an urgency that, hey, I might not be able to get this later. So these are all things you want to think about when you're sending traffic to your page, is what is going to drive them to do the action now as opposed to a month later, where you might not be able to track where that lead came from.
This is, to me, another really great example in urgency, and Brandon can touch upon this a little bit, but when I was looking to book a hotel for an upcoming trip, they really showed where the limited quantity is, and they were 4 rooms left. And so when there's 2 rooms left or 4 rooms left, you kind of know you have a very short amount of time to act. Other things I've seen, like overstock, purchasing furniture, I saw that. I think it's just something where if you see that, like on Guilt, that it's already in someone else's shopping cart, you know you have a very limited time.
Right, and what you want to try to get them to avoid doing is there's an overload of information. A lot of people talk about that, where they can go to hotels.com in this instance, they can go to Kayak, they can go to anywhere else to find hotel rooms. But what's going to drive them to go through your site? If they feel like if they come back later, it might be too late to get this deal. That's certainly a big impact. That's certainly a big driver for them to make that purchase now and to forego that fear of, or forget over that idea of, I can go back to 5 other sites and come back here in a day after I talk about it. So pretty simple idea, but it's something that you need to use well, right? You don't also want to make the urgency feel like, you want the urgency to feel authentic. You don't want to make it feel like if they come back here and a week later it's still 4 rooms left, that might start to be suspicious, right? So you want to use it in an authentic way. You don't want to just make everything urgent, right? Like, buy now or we'll burn down your building. That's not a good urgent message. It's something that needs to be authentic. It needs to be something that is going to trigger the desired action versus make them think that you're using it as a card. So
it's like that coworker who always flags every message with urgent, and after a while you just stop believing that it's urgent.
No, that's a fantastic point. If everything's urgent on your landing page, then nothing's urgent, right? Because you need to have something that's urgent. If every single thing that you put on your landing page is driving urgency, it's almost overwhelming, right? So it loses its impact if everything they can do on the landing page is stressing to do it now, because then they don't know what action you're driving. So you want to make sure that you're driving the urgency around the sole action you're looking to track.
Absolutely.
That's a fantastic point about everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the next one I think we really want to talk about is value. And what I've heard Brandon say before is, how do you, when someone gives you their contact information or their money, how do you show them that they're getting really good value? And so he can kind of touch upon the different ways.
Yeah, so a lot of things that go around value, and what we're talking about value is here is the perceived value of what you're offering, right? So if I click on, say, a paid ad on Google and I get to your site, and if I don't feel immediately when I get there that what you're offering is something that I want, and also that what you're offering is worth what you're asking me to give, that's a huge point. And why we put in free content and free trials here is that a lot of people assume that an email or that asking for a name or a phone number it's at a cost, but really to people that is, right? Because if you know that consumers know that if they give you your email, there's a chance you're going to use that for something. If they give you your name or your phone number, you're going to use that for something because you wouldn't ask for it unless it was a tangible thing that you want. So what you got to keep in mind is if you offer, say, a free white paper, you see that a lot on sites. Well, you're asking for an email. Well, if they have no idea what this white paper is going to be about, if they have no idea what the value or the testimonials or why it's something worth their email, they're not going to give it to you. Or they're going to give you a fake email. That's another thing they do too, is if you see a lot of fake leads coming through, what that could be is not just that maybe you have bad traffic. It might be that your value is misleading and they don't feel it's worth giving you a real email, right? And that's why people do that generally, is they feel like, okay, you know what, I'm not sold really that what you're offering here is worth me getting hassled over email, or I'm not sold that you're not going to hassle me over email. And that's part of value too, is that putting a privacy policy or a policy that we will not sell your email, we will not spam you. All of those things go into just a simple process. And then you get down to the obvious points of value of, why should I sign up? Why should I? What's in it for me? What's in it for me to purchase what you're providing? Free trials are a great way to allow people to have a less of a risk, right? So if that risk versus reward is very clear to them, then they know that they're more prone to give you what you want.
Well, and I think that's a really valid point when you talked about that fear of being spammed. When I've researched purchasing a home before, you give your contact information to see the different listings out there, and I had someone who called me nonstop, and so now I'm very apprehensive to ever give my contact information just to see listings for real estate. So I have used fake emails before because I don't perceive what I will get in return as value.
Yeah.
So if someone had a no spam policy, I'd be so much more likely to trust them.
Sure, and I think that's a great point too, is that if you're bringing someone to a landing page and the first thing you do is say, I need your email before I show you what you're going to get, would you fill that out? And that's what you need to ask yourself, is when I look at my own landing page, if I looked at this on the outside and an external view, would I be comfortable giving my email, my personal information out before I even know what this product looks like? Would I even know what I'm going to get? And the answer is going to usually be no. And you got to think of that when you put your landing page together, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to scare them off, because it's very easy, right? And that's what doesn't get looked at enough. Just because someone clicked on your ad doesn't mean they have any loyalty to you. They don't care that it cost you $25 or $10. If they get to that landing page and you scare them off in second one, they're going to pop off, and then you just spent whatever you spent to get them there.
Yep.
So you need to really take into account being conscientious around giving that value prop, showing an example of what you're about to ask them to buy, or show them, and we'll get into this more too, is show them why it's valuable.
And we can kind of give some examples of people who show at least value. State Farm, one of the things, people are always looking to save money, and so they do an example very prominently telling you what the value is and why you should be able to give your information. And it's a very simple landing page. It's a multiple step process, but right away they let you know what the value will be.
Right, and I'm just reading, as we're talking here too, I'm reading the chat, and Richard Tamir brought up a really good point, which we're going to get into, is that trust is really important as well. I think with value, a lot of these things are related to each other, right? If your urgency isn't valuable, then no one's going to care about it. If your value doesn't also incur trust that, hey, if I give you my personal information, you're not going to go off and steal it, right? So that's a big thing too. So I think that's a great point that Richard brings up there, is that a lot of these things are components of one another. And if you don't have all four of these that we're going to talk about in a good enough manner, you're still driving people away. So, to Elaine's point, this is a great example. It's very simple. You get an auto quote, but here's the thing. You might get 40% off what you're paying now, and that's a great look at just what the value is. And again, here too is another example of there's a million places you could probably find the same sort of landing page, right? If you're looking for financing, there's a lot of financing people out there. But what separates you from the pack, right? And that goes into value. It goes into, all right, I have 10 other ads that I saw when I searched on Google. Why should I go with this landing page? And there's a lot of components on this site, right? Citi, and we'll get into this too, is trust, right? You know who Citibank is. Now, whether or not you trust the brand, that kind of goes into some branding options. But the value here is that you get $500 off closing costs. Maybe they know that people are looking for that when they sign up for financing. It may end up being enough for someone to sign up. It's hard to tell, but those things are all inherent in landing pages. And a lot of the things we talk about here, what I want to stress too, is that you want to test these things. There's not going to be the silver bullet you're going to use the first time that's going to work, right? This promo that you put up here may not work, but you want to keep trying new ones and see what drives the best. And that is a key part of landing pages. In the same way that you test different banners, different email messages, different brochures, different ads, you need to do the same thing with your landing page because that's such a crucial point. That's why if you go into a retail store, they switch up the locations of items a lot. They switch up what's on the front of the aisle versus what's in the back of the aisle because they're always seeing what drives more buying behavior. So you need to do the same thing with your landing page. You can't make it a year ago and think it's going to still have the same relevance a year later. So.
Absolutely. So the next, actually, let me go back for a second. One of the things I saw in chat come up, and I know this is something Brandon's passionate about, is short versus long forms on a website. So if you're looking to gain a lead, how much information do you ask for and how much can you expect? And I think Brandon has some really good points on this.
Yeah, and you got to think about people in the same way that when you go online, right? Everybody that does marketing or that runs a marketing campaign also goes online and fills out forms, right? You've probably done that a million times in your life. So how do you feel when you're asked to fill out 4 questions versus 30? Right? Or if you know that, hey, I think that this is the first step, and if you don't tell them that there's 5 other steps after that, again, back to that loyalty thing, they don't have any reason to sign up for you if you're going to make it painful, right? So you should ask for only the information that seems relevant to what you're offering. It goes back to the value. If you're like free white paper, give me your social security number. Do you think anyone's going to sign up for that? No. Right? And you got to look at, are you asking the right questions from the person that you're targeting based on what you're giving, right? If you're giving a white paper, an email might be fine. If you're giving out a white paper and you want to know their home address and how much they make a year just because you're trying to get a demographic data, either they're going to fill that out falsely, they're going to skip through it as quick as they can and just fill out whatever the first option is. It's that rule of, tab through a form and just fill out the first option because they don't care. They just want what you're offering, and they don't care if they give you the right information, right? So you got to make them care. You got to make them feel like, hey, you know what? I understand. They're doing a home refinancing quote, so they need to know my city, my state, all the taxes that are involved in it, and give them reasons why you're asking it. That doesn't happen enough. People don't also say, the reason we're asking for this information is it helps us give you a better quote, or it helps us give you a better service. And a lot of times people, especially with all the identity fraud and stuff like that, there's a lot of concern still about giving out too much.
Absolutely. The next area we wanted to talk about is credibility. How do you, go into a website and feel that they are subject matter experts or that their product does what they say it will? That's something that I think is really important, really important for websites to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I think, when we look at credibility, what we want to do is that the Internet's changed a lot from where it started, and what's gotten there is that people start to rely on, am I the first person to do this? Am I the first person am I the guinea pig for your service or product or offering? And a lot of that goes back into that fear that they're getting duped, right? It's very relatively low cost to get a website up. It's a relatively low cost to start an AdWords campaign. And they don't know you from anybody else unless you have a huge brand behind you, right? Like Citibank's one thing, but if you are a new mover in a new industry, there's a lot you have to prove to them about why they should trust you. And this goes into credibility. Show them testimonials. Show them the clients you've worked with, right? That's a big thing. That if they know that they're not the first person you're testing out your product on, that goes a long way. There's first adopters for sure, but Oftentimes, the majority of people don't want to be the first person to know if you're a good plumber or not, right? And go through awards, show off a little bit, and make sure those awards are real. That's the big thing. These testimonials can't be fake. Yeah, I know that's a big thing right now, and it's been a big thing for a while. Is that it's easy for you to just write out, "Hey, my business is awesome, John Smith." Right? People know that. If you don't have a picture, if you don't have more information than their name, people are pretty smart these days, and they're getting more and more educated on what is fake and what is real. And if you're just going to throw up a bunch of fake testimonials that your coworker wrote for you, if that gets found out, that's going to do a lot more damage to your authenticity than anything. So
I've seen that a lot, actually, where people have gotten caught from everything from like fake movie reviewers to testimonials, and it just hurts your credibility, which is a currency that you can't easily earn back.
Right, and the thing is that a lot of people will say, well, I don't have any testimonials. Well, maybe that's something that's more telling than it should be, right? If you don't have testimonials, maybe you're not asking for it enough, or maybe you're not at a stage where that's a thing that you can put, but maybe you can put up your client logos. Maybe you can put up recommendations you've gotten through social. Now, that's similar to testimonials, but Lane brought this up, this is why you see a like button, or how many people have retweeted this, or how many people have used this. If that's relevant, of course, use that. Awards, even if it's something that you feel doesn't really have a lot of pertinence, to show that you've been granted awards by J.D. Power, at the highest level, or anything down from that. Show off that you have it, and then link off possibly to like a hovering tooltip that shows what this award's about. So really do a good job of proving who you are in the same way you're going to have to do that on the phone, on a sales call. All those things that you have to do there, you need to do on your landing page.
Absolutely. One example I loved of social proof is I joined a subscription service for $10 a month. The service is called Birchbox, and they send me deluxe makeup samples. And it's a little nerve-wracking to give over your information for a subscription service. And I had 4 friends who had liked it on Facebook, which kind of gave me a clue that this was a legit service. So it really helps to see those kind of things in work.
Yeah, and Sean brings up a good point in the chat there too. If you have press testimonials, like if you've been reviewed by a certain press exponent, that's great too. But if you also have user ones, it really depends on what you're offering. If something that is going to be driven better by big brands and big institutions giving you some credibility, that's great. But if you can mix it in there, like, hey, CNN said this about us, but also Tom Smith from Missouri said this, show a picture of them, that's great. And give rewards back to your customers for giving you testimonials. You don't want to say give me good ones, but hey, if you give me a testimonial that I use, here's $50 off your next purchase.
Absolutely. So we'll kind of show how this can work in play, where you can, second to load. Here we have a testimonial which kind of lends credibility. It's a little bit of a busy landing page, but it has that flashing testimonials that you can see in action, and people really like to see that. And they have a good use of a picture, a real name, and the company. Right,
and here's a good example of what we were talking about, is that you're not going to want to show the testimonial and give the guy social security number so that they can prove that that's a real person, right? We're not looking to that point, but here shows a picture of the person. It shows, at least what site they're from, and it gives at least some credence that if someone did some minimal amount of research, that they hopefully would find this review out there somewhere. There's a lot of review sites out there, and if you can use that on your site for real, and you know what? There's also arguments out there of showing real ones where maybe it's a mix of good and bad, but people understand that people aren't perfect, right? Companies aren't perfect. So, and I think I saw a question there too of, more examples of social proof, which I'm glad you asked, because I think the next slide shows an example of a decent amount of social proof here.
This one I really liked. It's Vocus, which is related to social media, but what they did is they had a scrolling screen of tweets that people said about Vocus when people use the @ or mention Vocus online, and that lends a lot of credibility. I don't know if it's real time or if they just selected, the best of the tweets, but I thought it was a really unique way to use social proof. And I saw another question related to social proof, which was, are product reviews social proof? Absolutely. Not to sound really like such a shopaholic, but I just purchased a couch from Overstock, and I read every single review. And what I understood is it's a little bit hard to put together. It takes 2 people, but like it's good quality for the money. And so knowing that going into that is so much better. Like, you know, ModCloth is a company that does really good product reviews, and you can really go in depth, and it just lends an immense amount of credibility. And Charlene Lee wrote about that in her book, Groundswell, about people just lend so much more trust. And it's also beneficial as a company because the example they used in Groundswell e-bags, they had a really top-selling bag that was getting horrible product reviews, and they sent it to the manufacturer, and they kind of corrected a problem, and it was just an all-around great solution for the users, for e-bags, and for the manufacturer who improved their product. So there's a lot of advantage to incorporating social proof.
Yeah, and I mean, Zappos is famous for customer service, and if you can think of somebody that just goes over and beyond on the Twitter and every channel they can think of to follow up, and that's the rule right there, is that if people are going to be mad at you at some point. Your customers aren't going to be happy at some point. That's just the reality of business. And if you can show that you deal with it, well, that goes a long way. And I think that's the important part here. You know, these landing pages don't exist in a silo, right? If they come here, they can have another browser open where they're searching reviews on you. So if you're afraid to show your Twitter stream because you know that there's like a lot of people mad at you right now, well, maybe that's telling you that you need to deal with that, right? Maybe that's telling you that you can't just hide that, because that doesn't mean that the guy that's on this landing page right now can't just open another tab and search on Twitter and go, wow, there's a lot of people mad, and they're trying to make believe that that's not happening.
Yep.
So, you know, you got to be very conscious of the fact that they can find reviews on you off of your site these days. That's a big change that the Internet's brought to a lot of companies, is that, you know, it's very hard to control what people are saying about you, and you know, trying to control it versus trying to confront it is a big part of, you know, how to deal with marketing in the social atmosphere of things. So.
Absolutely. And I think that goes into a little bit about the next value we want to help you learn how to evoke in your visitors is trust. You know,
Yeah.
How do I know if I gave Brandon $20 that he's going to pay me back? How do I know, you know, how do you well, that's a good reminder for future use. But, you know, if you're giving financial information to a company, it's extremely nerve-wracking these days. My credit card information actually was just stolen yesterday, and my bank called and told me singlemuslim.com, someone had set up a profile on singlemuslim.com. So now I'd done all those online purchases. So I'm going back and wondering if it was one of those companies. And so there's different ways that you can help people feel really comfortable and help build trust.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Joe Bowman just asked a question that I wanted to dive into in this trust conversation. If, you know, is raw HTML and CSS better than WordPress? Well, that kind of goes into a little bit of a broader topic of, you know, does your site's design and stability and all of those things that encounter a usability function offer trust, right? If they come to your landing page and it takes an hour to load because you're using a really heavy template, or you're using so much Flash and crazy programming, you know, I don't want to get too far into the technical things, but if the page is a pain to load and it's a usable nightmare, then yeah, that has a huge impact, right? Versus just doing a raw page that's very simple and elegant. That can go a long way with trust, and I think people don't look at that enough, right? You see hand over fist these landing page examples of people that maybe spent an hour to make a landing page, and you know, it looks like something from 1995 where you'd see a bunch of scrolling banners with pictures of cats on it, and I don't know if I'm going to give my credit card information that, right? And that goes a long way. If the site doesn't look reputable, or that they at least spend some money to make the site, that speaks a lot about whether or not they want to trust you.
Yep.
You know, and that goes into memberships. You know, are you a member of the Better Business Bureau? That might be a very old guard thing to do, but it does go a long way, because at least they know they have an option.
Especially if you're a brick and mortar business, a
Sure.
smaller business, people really, you know, they want to know you're trustworthy.
Yeah, and if you're VeriSign, you know, you see that a lot. VeriSign,
VeriSign.
you know, hack-proof, all those things that you see on websites to show that, hey, you know, we're taking care. If you're asking for personal information and someone gets a warning on their browser that this site is not secure, I mean, really, that's another huge component that doesn't get looked at enough. There's so many things that people can make bad decisions on a landing page that error on the way of making people not trust you. So look at all those things. You know, even media logos, that has a little bit to do with credibility too. But you know, how many people have talked about you? How many people have done reviews on you? That still goes into trust. All that credibility kind of goes into, hey, you know, at least I know that other people have risked their personal information or whatever you're asking for to work with you, and it seems to have worked out, right? Brandon didn't pay back Elaine, so I'm not going to borrow him any money because he's a thief. That starts to build a credence up. So think of all those things, but design's a heavy component of that. So
absolutely, and maybe we can kind of show. Sorry about that, guys. We can talk about, I think this one does a really good job of, dentists, for a lot of people, are very nerve-wracking. So having some trust, they've been seen on top video or media channels. They have certifications. They have millions of happy patients and testimonials. So I think they do a good job of evoking some of those feelings of trust and credibility.
Right. I mean, if you look at the site, it looks like there was it's pretty clean. It shows a lot of the key things that they're making you do. Right at the very top there, they're asking you to get started. They're not trying to hide below the frame. That has a lot to do too. If they feel like sometimes people can take an inverse relationship to how far you bury the call to action, because maybe you need to prove yourself really, really, really well before people are willing to, and that can have a thing too, that implied confidence. But yeah, all these things are certifications that the Better Business Bureau, VeriSign, all those things. Then you look at credibility right there, as Elaine pointed out, that you have a review. So all of that wraps up into whether or not I want to use this site to find a dentist versus the other options I have.
One thing that I think is interesting about this site, and I'd love to heat map it, one of the things, when someone has a picture looking you directly in the eye, you're more apt to just stare at that, so people's eyes might not move over to the call to action. So a lot of times if you're including a picture, one thing that's important to understand about how the psychology of people look at landing pages is they look people in the eye, so their attention gets drawn that way. So consider if you're using an image of someone, use their side profile. And the other thing that studies have shown, men prefer pictures of women and women don't care. So consider that. And I don't know if it's a bit, maybe people trust male dentists more, which might be a little bit of sexism in the landing page. But to be honest, you have to test what works, what works. So those are some things to keep in mind when building out your landing page. Yeah,
there's a lot of weight in the stock images you pick. You see that a lot on landing pages. There's a reason why a lot of people use people's faces. You'll see that on a lot of blogs and a lot of discussions around landing page usability, is that people automatically assign an element of trust to just another person's picture, right? There's an automatic attraction to the eyes to go to that. So that goes a long way versus just having like, cartoon characters or whatever you might have in there, or just symbols. People's faces imply a certain level of psychological trust with your product. So.
The other thing that I think is important to understand when building a landing page is the psychology of color and how it affects people's moods and emotions and how it causes them to act. And this graphic from Kissmetrics kind of shows the different ways that people react to colors, and this will be included for it. But of course, like red, people often use for urgency. People use blue a lot because it's calming and secure. One of the interesting things I read on one blog, Shoe Money, was that blue is, when in doubt, use blue. It's the most favorite color of everybody, and it has the most kind of like neutral, pleasing effect. So some good advice about colors.
No, I think, this all goes into just sort of testing too, right? See what works. In my past, I've run a lot of usability tests, and there was simple usability testing, and there's some questions I'm seeing there too around just what picture did we use. Ethnicity gets a little hard to talk about because you got to know sort of the demographic you're going after, but definitely test to see if that makes a difference. Test to see if a red link versus a blue link makes people click more. Test to see if a green button versus a yellow button does, because these are good examples, but sometimes your industry, your product, your value, all those things maybe are the exception to some of the rules there, and that's why you want to never just rely on one landing page that you read all these best practices. Even these ones we're giving now, you want to test to see if they have an improvement, because there's always exceptions to the rule, right? There's always exceptions, and especially as things move closer to mobile, these things are going to likely change a bunch, right? You can't have a giant image on your landing page when you're looking at a really small like screen on an Android phone. So that's going to change some things too as that gets more and more mobile. So, but always test a lot of these things. But these colors do matter, right? If your whole site's red and contrasting with another color, it's hard to look at. Or if your text is like all white on a dark green screen, it just makes it uncomfortable to look at sometimes too. And you want to think about, does my page have a pleasing effect? Do the colors sort of go with what I'm trying to do? All that stuff. So.
Absolutely. And to go a little bit more into some of the two things that I think can also make a difference in how people will respond to your landing page is the psychology of time. People are impatient very naturally, and so when you have a slow website, it will adversely affect your sales and your lead time. And that's something a lot of people don't take into consideration. Amazon found that for every 100 millisecond of load time, there was a 1% decrease in sales. And for a billion-dollar company such as Amazon, I mean, that's really going to hurt them. So that's something to keep in mind as you're building out your landing pages.
Oh, for sure. I think, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, too, is if you make someone go through a 1 hour process to get a white paper, is that worth this? I mean, this time gets into value, gets into credibility. If your page loads forever, I mean, that says something about you, whether or not you want that to happen or not. If your form is way too long, that says something about you as well. So you gotta test. You gotta make sure that when you roll out a landing page, see what people do. Send it out to friends or family or whoever you can. Depending on the size of your company, if you have an agency that you can do testing with, and see how it rhymes and see what it works out to and see what changes you can make to improve that. I mean, Amazon's a great example because they do so much usability testing.
Yeah.
They put so much time and effort in that, because if you can make an incremental change from a 2% conversion rate to a 3% conversion rate, that can have a huge effect, right? If you've made your site that much better, you've just pretty much gotten a better salesperson on your floor, right? That's how you have to think of the landing pages. That's the representative you have assigned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for your company. And if that person doesn't have a good rapport with people, then that's the same thing you're going to have on your landing page, right? You wouldn't have a guy that swears at everybody that walks into your store as your lead salesperson, unless that's what you're selling, is being sworn at, I guess. But I mean, that's what you got to look at. And all these things wrap up into it. And I think some questions there too is test that. If you're worried that a certain color scheme is going to contrast with your branded color scheme, make a version of the landing page that has it and that doesn't have it, and see which one works better. There's nothing wrong with having 3 versions of the same landing page and serving them and to see which one performs better. There's a lot of options out there, and we'll talk about a little bit of that at the end here of how to test sites. How do you test your landing page? If you only have one web designer, that's you, and you're already busy with a million other things, how are you going to take time to make 5 versions of every landing page if you already have 10? So.
Exactly. And then some quick tips that you want to think about is the psychology of writing. You want people to picture themselves, using your product or using your service. So when you say you benefit, people feel so much better than people can benefit. Or you'll have teeth that are 3 shades whiter, not crest white strips can increase teeth 3 shades whiter. So think about using active voice, using, what voice you want to use, but you really want people to be able to picture themselves using your service successfully.
Right, because when you look at your landing page, it's for a specific reason, right? You shouldn't be sending people to your home page. You shouldn't be sending them to the same page that your email traffic comes to if you're sending paid search traffic, because those people perform differently, right? And you want the writing, as Elaine examples here, to be very, very powerful, right? You don't want to just copy the brochure you sent 3 months ago through the mail and then just copy that on your landing page, because that's not the same people you're targeting anymore. They have a lower attention span. You don't, when we get into writing too, you want to really look at, am I writing too much on this page? Is this page so overwhelming that they can't find out what the heck I sell? Right, so you want to be very short, bullets. The tone of voice you use, just like Elaine explains, has a lot to do with whether people read well through your site or not. So.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick look at 2 landing pages that need a little bit of help. I wanted to call them bad seeds with the psychology of landing pages, but I got kiboshed on that. So the first one, and we kind of blocked their logo, But if you look at it, this is an extremely busy website, multiple calls to action. It doesn't pass the 6-foot test. Nothing that evokes trust or credibility. Like, a massage is a very intimate experience, and this landing page doesn't feel trustworthy or credible. It's so busy.
No, right. I mean, if you look at a lot of things here, like $49, well, I mean, right off the bat, you can't really see very well, what is that $49 for, and is that a good price competitively? And that's a lot of the reason people use discounts. You might be paying much more than the other person uses, but if you think it's discounted, there's a lot of psychology around the fact that, hey, $49, down from $59, oh my gosh, I'm getting $10 off. Well, do I know if $49 is a competitive price? That might not matter if you think you only have a limited time to check in and get this deal. So when you look at this landing page, it's not overly apparent what they want you to do. What I get from this page is they just want you to learn about who they are.
Yep.
Right? And that's what this implies to me, is that, oh, this is just an informational page that I can bookmark and come back to next time I need to know where this is at. There isn't anything that's like, oh my gosh, I can get, maybe they have a Groupon running. Maybe they have something going on that would drive me to go, you know what, I was looking for a massage place, but now I know I want to use this place because if I don't act now, I don't get $10 off or any of those other items that we've talked about.
And I think this is an example because I found this through a paid search ad when I was looking for a massage. Is when you have a poor landing page, it's like trying to score a touchdown and not getting the ball to the 10-yard line and just dropping it. And it kind of loses the point, because if you're investing all that money in paid search, and the keywords, and there's a lot of competition, but yet you're not doing simpler landing pages and investing in that time, you're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Right.
And then the next one is a financial site where people kind of monitor their finances and their spending and their savings. And for a financial site, I thought it was really interesting that they had nothing to evoke trust or credibility. And is what Brandon was speaking about earlier with time. Looking at their writing, I mean, that's a lot to weed through to understand their value proposition.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, it's very elegant looking site, it's very simple design, but, probably one of the quickest things that you would see that, if you were using the service, is that you'd probably be worried about safety. And they had that on the page, but it's pretty far down the page. It doesn't have any more prominence than the other bullets that they have there that are in bold. So what you want to do is really, maybe show some things here that give you some sort of peace of mind, that are very quick visuals, that are like, oh, they use this, they're VeriSign, there are any number of things you can imply safety and security without requiring somebody to read 3 paragraphs. And it's not to say that these landing pages are terrible, right? We're just trying to give examples of pretty common landing pages and some things that you could improve upon, right? When you look at here, this kind of even goes with the color palette. What they did a little well was that, the sign-up is very, different color than green. Now, say if they used a green button there, that would blend it in with everything, right? So,
yep.
A good thing they used here is that, a pink pig there brings your attention down to the button. They did that for a reason, right? But when we look at all the other things that are implied there, you want to also try to hit upon what your demographic, what your target's going to be worried about. What kind of industry you're in, what's the common fears, the common threats, the common problems. If you're a car lot, people inherently don't trust things with car salesmen, because I used to be one, and you want to sort of talk about family-friendly, all those things. So when you look at a landing page examples like this, you just want to always never be content, right? And that's the point we want to get across here, is that you might have a landing page that's been doing great. You have a 5% conversion rate on it, and you're happy with it. But what if you made a change and you tested that and you got that up to a 6? Right, so complacency, that doesn't do any good when you're looking on the online market, because things change. It's so much quicker to suddenly see that 5% suddenly fall to a 3% because maybe an article came out about you that was a bad review of you, and people are seeing that. So, always keep that in mind and always do testing. So,
absolutely. And then, for those of you out there, we said we talk about some of the solutions. If you're tight on resources, which I know a lot of companies out there are, 2 sites that can help you put together landing pages with very little development work are Unbounce, which we love, and we've used in the past ourselves while our website was in transition, and we had great conversion rates with Unbounce. Another one to consider recently launched was Premise by Copyblogger for if you have a WordPress site. That's another one to consider. Also, if you're just looking for great landing page tips. We write about it on the Trada blog, which you can visit trada.com/blog. But visit Unbounce because they have really great content related to landing pages. And then the other one I wanted to talk to you about that we use all the time is a site called Optimizely, and it helps you A/B test your websites without development work. So be sure to check these guys out if you're looking for a little bit of help.
For sure, for sure.
And then I wanted to talk about two things to come up. We have some webinars coming up that we think would be of interest to you. Holiday prep, next Tuesday, we'll talk about PPC and SEO. For those of you who think it's way too earlier, I did the holiday paid search webinar last year. One of the things that's really interesting, you will start seeing holiday-related keywords popping up right now in August. So it's really important to start being on top of that. Start thinking about those really early bird shoppers and how you can be attracting them from the get-go. And then it'll be part of a series, so if you are a procrastinator, as some of us are, and you don't feel quite ready for holiday stuff, we'll be doing another one in September and another one in October. And the holiday prep landing page optimization will be with Ollie Gardner from Unbounce, so that'll be great. And then we just want to touch upon a couple points about Trada. And let you guys know that Trada has a bunch of experts, 2,000 to be exact, who will do the PPC for you. So they come up with the keywords, the ad copy, the ad groups. We don't currently have a landing page solution, but we work with Unbounce as needed. So if that's something you're missing out, and it really, I think, relieves a lot of the pressure off people who are looking to do paid search. You have multiple experts working on your campaign, you're getting diversity of thinking, you're getting constant optimization, and you can be on Google, Yahoo, and Bing, which is really nice for a lot of people. Because Bing tends to convert extremely well, but most people don't have the resources to run 2 paid search campaigns. And for a lot of people, especially smaller companies, I think they start paid search campaigns and kind of set and forget, and then they're surprised when it's not successful. So if you have any questions or if you want to schedule a demo, you can email me, elaine@trada.com, and you can also just put in the chat box that you'd like a demo and we can get you signed up. So I think it's time for us to talk about questions. Let's see what some of the questions out here are. Let's see.
I'm just reading through your log. I think we answered a few of them as we were going, but
so what are your thoughts about duplicating landing pages with one link for PPC and the other link, same with TW at the end to track Twitter users? I think you would need a duplicate landing page process to track PPC and Twitter users.
So if I'm understanding the question there, are you looking to have one landing page to serve both your Twitter followers and your paid search? And then really the answer to that depends on if are those the same people you're targeting, right? So do they both have the same needs? Are they both as urgent? And what you want to do is research kind of what the differences are between that. Usually what we would recommend is having a separate landing page for your Twitter feed that you're promoting on, and then a separate landing page for several landing pages for your pay-per-click, because when you look at pay-per-click, there's a lot of division you have there from ad groups that you might be pushing different products, you might be pushing different promotions, all those things. So you want a different landing page for each one generally, because that gives you the best visibility. And if that's not possible, and for some like resource constraints have you only able to have one landing page for everybody, then yeah, there are some things you can do. You can insert different tracking codes into your links when you put those links up there, right? You can have like if you use Omniture, there's what's called EAD IDs, or even just if you're using Google, they have UTM codes that you can put on the end of your links that say, what campaign it's been driven by, what source, and then you can at least define like what source is driving the best leads, what seems to convert higher, and that can actually give you some information if you don't have it already on do I need a separate landing page, or if they're both equally converting and they both have a decent amount of quality across both, then there are exceptions again. But generally what you want to do is sort of divide up your different channels so you can get a very clear picture of who's working and who isn't, because if you're sending everybody the same landing page, that quickly muddies your data a bit. It makes it hard to make decisions back on what keywords are working or back on what ads are working. Because that's what you want to determine with a landing page, right? And that's the whole purpose of this webinar, is to kind of talk through. This is sort of the oft-forgotten part of marketing, is that so much focus gets put on to how high am I ranking in SEO, how high am I ranking in my pay-per-click, what position am I in, what my price is. But if you're looking at the conversions aspect of things, the landing page has a lot of effect on all of those things. So.
Our next question, which I think is a great one, how do images lend credibility, and are they important in landing pages?
Oh, sure. So, it does have a lot to do with your industry. Say, if you're in an industry that's very big on image, right? So, like if you're an Audi dealer, where there's a lot of brand with luxury and a certain lifestyle, then images do have a lot to say, right? If your images don't match with what your demographic is at, that's also a big thing, right? So if you're trying to, maybe you're in an industry that's trying to build confidence in the home market, but all you show is pictures of foreclosed homes, right? So that takes a lot out of it, right? And you also want to make sure that the images don't distract too much, right? If it's so visually explosive on your page that it loses all other calls to actions, that has a big thing. And you see that a lot, right? You see where people go crazy with images, where they have an image slideshow, then they have a video, and then they have, an Ajax gallery right below that, and right in the middle somewhere is the button that you actually get to purchase what you want. That can become overwhelming. So you want to really weigh whether the image has a point aesthetically or a point in terms of building value or credibility. So, images are logos too, right? So if you're adding in your Inc. 500 or if you're adding in your VeriSign, that also has credence there. So you want to really weigh, when you're looking at the design, what's the point of every element on your landing page? And if you can't assign a point for it, then it probably doesn't need to be there, right? And that's how you really want to look through it. If you're just adding fluff just to get it to a certain height of a landing page, you really want to take some account of that. So.
One question that I really enjoyed, and I think a lot of people struggle with, is for your landing page, how aesthetically pleasing should your colors be, or how important is it to make something jump instead? Because a lot of people, love a good look of a website, but they, know that maybe a bright orange, button is what's going to deliver results. So.
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because a lot of people use orange, a lot of people use green. There's a lot of psychology between those colors, as we talked about, and sometimes it can go too far to where you have a page that's all pink, and then you have a giant purple and orange blinking button, because that's going to attract it. But there's a point to where you get from aesthetically pleasing to sort of campy, to where that page almost becomes sort of comically too bright. And that goes back to what we talked about in design. You want to make sure that the design looks like there had been some time put into making it look good. And that call to action doesn't always have to be your branded color. There's a lot of that still, that old camp of, we have a brand guidelines and a color guidelines we have to match everywhere on our site, and if we go against that, somehow that's going to break something. Well, if the call to action blends in with the rest of your site, then it's really not a call to action, it's just a button, right? Yep. And you want that button to be very loud. Now, you don't have to use colors. People also use larger typefaces, larger font sizes. They also use, they lead images. So, right, if you read anything that's been on usability, like the Nielsen book, he talks a lot about, tracing the eye. Does the eye start from left to right and end at your call to action? Because if it doesn't, then you're leading them away from what you want them to do. So there's also options out there too, just to do eye tracking studies to see on your site, where are your images, where are your colors, where is your text leading everybody's mouse? Are they leading to the very bottom, your call to actions at the top right? Those things can have a pretty high impact if you just change the color or change the layout.
Absolutely. I love this question. How can you build, or what's the best way to get credibility when you are a new business with no client testimonials?
That's a great question. I think where you get into that on a landing page is if you don't have testimonials, right? Maybe you just launched, like your example is, you can start to create some credibility by going out there and getting the reviews, right? So sometimes that's a step before the landing pages, is to find out how you can get testimonials. If you just launched, right? If you're a brand new product and you already have a pay-per-click campaign, what are you asking people to do? Are you asking too soon, right? Are you asking people to do something before you have some background? Are you spending money on pay-per-click to get people to purchase a product that doesn't have a lot of brand recognition, that doesn't have a lot of testimonials? What you have to do is be a little inventive. You have to start talking about all the new features you bring, right? So when you look at credibility, sometimes the credibility is that, hey, no, we're not the same as the old guys. We're not the same products. We're doing things differently. Here's an example. Here's some information on what we are, and do some comparison. And that goes a long way too. If you give them enough information to show that, hey, we're new, but we're not risky because we do things better. We save you money. We save you time. And if you're very honest that, hey, we just launched and we're trying to do things, so here's a promotion code. The first 100 people that use us get $50 off, or use us and give us your feedback and you have a chance to win, blah, blah, blah. All of those things you can use to start to build up a testimonial log, build up a review log, start doing that proactively to kind of build up what you're lacking. And I think that can go a long way. That's why you see a lot of these new businesses, especially like in the mobile app side of things. And they do a lot to prove why they're better than the old way of doing things.
We had a Trada-related question. People were wondering, what is the minimum budget that Trada is willing to work with?
Trada, so our minimum budget for Trada currently is at $3,000 per campaign. And the reason being, there's a lot of that around, we work with optimizers pretty heavily. So these optimizers are the crowd that we work with. And for them to feel it's worth their time because they get paid on performance, whether it's click or conversion, they just need to feel that they have enough budget to split amongst a few people to actually make an impact. So that's where our budget is. It's a $3,000 minimum for a campaign. And we can definitely talk about that more. If you have other questions on that too, Elaine has her email up there too. We'd be happy to, delve deeper. If you'd like a demo just to kind of see, what we do as well. That's another thing we offer definitely. So.
One thing that I think is a great question: should a landing page an entire landing page be above the fold? Should you be able to see everything above the fold?
There's a lot of argument out there if the fold matters or not, and there's camps on both sides, right? Because, a lot of the aspect of the internet is changing where people have giant monitors now. Back when I started in 2001 being a web designer, everything was, 800 by 600 was pretty much the biggest you'd went because, you had those giant CRT monitors that you couldn't lug around without two people. So, monitors are getting bigger. Also, how people use the internet is getting different, right? You're on iPads, you're on phones. So, a lot of people are used to scrolling now on their phones, but also you want to keep that in mind too. Are you driving mobile traffic to your landing page? Have you looked at the fold in the right context? The fold on a monitor versus the fold on an iPhone, right? It's completely different. You want to make sure that the call to action is still visible. I would argue that putting it in both places is the best bet, right? If you have good information at the bottom of the page, make sure you have a call to action at the bottom of that too, because if they're having to read that far down, it usually means that they're still selling themselves on doing whatever you're asking them to do. So by the time they've read through that, if it's effective or not, make it easy for them to get through the process. You don't want to make it hard, right? There's nothing wrong with making it very easy for them to do what you're asking them to do. So if you put it at the top and they're like, I already did my research on domain.com. I know I want to go with this. I'm going to click here. Now they can. I don't know who domain.com is. I need to read through all the bullets, watch this little video you have, see if they're accredited, and by the time I get there, now I can click again, right? There's nothing wrong with having duplicate entries to your call to action. Now what you want to avoid is having too many entries, right? Because a lot of people have a complicated product or service that sometimes requires a phone number also. So what you want to make sure is that phone number is something you can track back. There was a question in there, I think, related to this of, should I have my 1-800 number on the same page that I have a form to fill out? Well, yes, but make sure that 100 number is something unique to that page. There's a lot of services you can use out there that do that for you if you don't have the ability. Google, for one, also started offering just recently a call service for your ads for pay-per-click. So all those things, keep in mind that everything that you allow them to use on that page needs to be able to be tracked. The phone number, your mailing address, somehow you need to make sure that they're sent, if for some reason your landing page allows people to send, snail mail to you, make sure it's to a person or it's to a specific P.O. box or whatever you can do to make sure that you know where that came from. I know that's a very unique example, but everything you give them as far as an exit and entry on that page needs to be trackable. And that's kind of the best practice for that.
Absolutely. So I think that wraps up for us because we are coming on just at an hour, and we don't want to take up any more time of your day, but we really appreciate everyone here for joining us, and hopefully look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for the webinar on holiday PPC and SEO. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.